Hello, Ken Spriggs here with a video starting my build of the Discovery, 2001 Discovery again. And as I mentioned in my last video, this is a commission build that I'm working on. And I started working on the interior from Green Strawberry. Really good set, really love this set. It's gonna go a long way to help me to make a fantastic interior with a lot less scratch building and struggle that I had on my original, which didn't have the same aftermarket parts available. A few issues that I'll go over in the video, but let's go ahead and take a look. All right, so here are the resin parts for the Green Strawberry Discovery pod bay interior. Fantastic set. It's a combination of mostly resin parts, which are really nicely cast, really nicely done. They remind me very much of styrene plastic. A little bit of rough edges here and there, but nothing major. Nice detail, nice and sharp. Some cleanup, of course, but it should be easy to do. Just to use a Dremel to cut these pieces off and sand them down. But quite a few parts to build up the entire pod bay. There's also some photo etch. There are some decals. There are a bunch of little pieces. And then I also have the set for the cockpit, which is all photo etch, which I'll be working on at another point. So right now what I'm doing is I'm gonna start cleaning up the extra casting parts off of these and start fitting them together and just kind of getting an idea of what I'm working with and what areas I'm going to have to make some adjustments to in order to do the lighting. For example, this is the lab area in the back behind the left side of the pod bay, and this little area right here has some screens which are photo etch, but this is a solid piece, so I'll have to carve some of that out in order to light it from behind, because I want those little displays to be lit up. Likewise, the back octagonal corridor, which they provide, which is pretty awesome, is a solid piece, no openings for lights, so I'm gonna have to figure out how to be able to get some light in that as well. All right, so let me go ahead and get some of these cleaned up, and then I will start fitting these together and get an idea of how the pod bay is going to work. All right, not too bad. So I just used a cutting wheel to cut off most of the extra resin mold parts, and then I went back in and used a sanding disc to sand them smooth. Cutting was a bit much. I had to wear a mask and goggles and put it inside a box so all the dust wouldn't be getting all over the place. And then the sanding was pretty easy. This is some nice resin. It's really nicely made. It's pretty smooth. It's easy to work with. So once I got it down to a certain point, I could sand it pretty smooth just with a emery board or some sandpaper, that kind of thing. So I'm doing an initial fitting. Get some light on that there. All right, so there's the floor and the three walls of the pod bay. There's the bottom part that it stands on. It's hard to see, but there's some little openings there where the ramps will extend out with the pods on them. And the whole floor is really great because it has some raised sections that you need, and it has photo etch that goes over top of it. So that can be painted separately, decaled. This can be painted separately, glued on top, that kind of thing. So really nicely designed. The walls as well. You have the small tanks in the back that are built in because they're really tiny. It'd be hard to work with. And there's several decals that go over that whole area to put the red stripes on the tanks, and the different raised areas here, the black panel right there. The tanks are separate that go in that little wall there. And then you have some other parts like this airlock wall is separate, which I just have stuck in there right now, and I still have to cut a piece of that off. And then you have the maintenance corridor, which comes in 2 halves, and that has some photo etch in the back that goes on it. Now that one I do want to light up with a back out of it, with a warm white LED as opposed to the white LEDs for the main pod bay. So I have to figure out how to work that out, but that should be okay. That shouldn't be too much of a problem. Here's how the roof is going to go. This is just all taped together, so it's not really going to stay on there well. Okay, but there's the roof, and it's got quite a bit of detail in it. Plus, it has extra parts that go on it as well. The little fan exhaust units that go on the top. So okay, so coming along very nicely. This is really going to be awesome to work with, easy to work with, and right now I'm just sort of piecing everything together to figure out how it's going to fit. Next thing I want to do is get out the command sphere, the bottom half, and just see how this is going to fit inside of it, and kind of marry up with that as well. Okay. All right, so I have the all the parts cut out and sanded down for the lab area, which is to the right side of the pod. It's on the back of this wall here. So here's the wall we see on the, if we're looking in on the left side of the pod bay, and you can see through that window, and the door's open as well. On the back, they have a little bit of detail, which is kind of cool, and the lab area extends out behind it. So I've already glued one piece on. The first piece I've glued on because I can paint these. They're all just going to be white with some decals on them. And then basically this goes into here like that. This is the roof with an opening for the ladder. This will end up going over here on top. Just kind of setting it there. Then you have this piece. This piece goes into that groove right there, and it follows that curve, so it's on this side. And this will be flush up against the inner part of the sphere, so this has to be rounded, and so does this, because this is all going to come up flush with the inside of the sphere there. And then this is the control panel, and so from this angle it's going to be down inside. This will be the back of it. And it does have some photo etch, so I've already cut it out. It's really cool. It has that panel over there, which I glued on because that's not going to be lit up. It's just a solid panel. That side one there too. Trying to focus there. They did put some holes in it. It'll look cool with the detail, but there's no way I'm going to light that one up. But I am going to light the ones here. So here's the piece. Let me put that in there. Okay, so there's the piece of photo etch that goes in there. So you've got the back screens, which I definitely want to light. There's just an oh so tiny hole which you can't really make out to the left of it for how. And then you have the controls down on the bottom. So all of these I can handle with one light. But what I'm going to have to do is cut out the back of this. See where I drilled the hole? I have to cut that out and down into it so I can hollow out underneath that control panel, just enough to get some light down in there. And then for this whole piece here, I can use one SMD. I'll just use a white one because it comes with decals for the front of this and the controls, and for the side control over here. And so if I have clear plastic behind that and put the decals over it, it should light through for the screens and give it the idea that those screens, those displays are lit up. It also has the markings for how as well. So I'm assuming if you line it up right, that little hole will light through for how as well. So let me get the decals out and I'll show you those. All right, so here's the decal sheet. And the ones on the left are for these controls here. So you have the main one here, which goes on the back. This one goes down on the flat part. And this little one goes over here to the right, this right side panel. Like I said, this one doesn't have a decal. I'll have to do some screenshots and see what color that is. Probably going to be black as well. Maybe color those panels some different colors. We'll see. The other ones here to the right are for the workbench in the main pod area. So they go on there. So I'll have to play with those and see how I'm going to use those on the workbench. But we'll get to that when we come to that point. So, okay. So right now I need to go ahead and cut out the portions. I want to leave enough on the left side and right side to be able to put that onto it. I may just cut straight down from the top and then cut most of this panel out just up until where the photo etch parts are gonna be lit up. You can see the bottom edge of this. There isn't any holes for lights, and then there's just a little edge on either side for the photo etch to stick onto. So I want to be able to leave a little bit for it to go onto to do light blocking. But that's the beauty of the photo etch, is that no light is going to come through this. Only where those holes are going to be for the controls. So once I get this all together and painted white, I will just put the decal over it. And like I said, I'll have some clear plastic that I can put behind these screens so that the decal won't go through the holes and break. I don't want to do that. So I haven't used these decals yet, so I'm hoping that they're going to be the same high quality as the rest of it. It's kind of hard to tell. They have a real flat look to them, which is cool. I can certainly seal them in with a flat coat, but I mean, certainly they're translucent. Oops, sorry. Trying to hold it and focus it. Certainly light will go through them. And like I said, the light's only going to go through the TV screen parts and the little hole for how and the controls, because the rest of it is going to be metal, so it's going to block it off. All right, let me get this cut out. I should be able to make short work of this lab area. Lighting it will be pretty easy from behind, and I can glue the whole thing together up to gluing it onto this wall. I don't want to glue that on there yet, because obviously I'm going to have to glue this part onto the main pod bay and get it painted and get a window in that and everything. So before I'm ready to go ahead and glue this on. But this whole piece can be one sub-assembly. I can have this on here, the side, the roof. It comes with a little photo etch ladder. Find that here. Sorry. Right there's a ladder. Looks pretty cool. I like how they rounded it off. That's how the ladder looks in the movie. And you bend it in the middle and you fold it in half and they go to two different parts. So that's going to be pretty cool. And that ladder, of course, is going to come up over here. It'll be attached, and it will extend up through this hole in the roof. So that'll be cool. All right. All right, so I used my Dremel to carve out the back of that. See if I can show you. You can see the light coming through the displays. It's hard to see, but there's light coming through where the controls are at the bottom. I have the whole back hollowed out. There's a little bit of a gap there at the bottom, sorry, which I can cover with a piece of stripping right in front of it once I glue it in place. And then I'm going to paint the whole thing with some flat black to light block it, at least on the back, and then white. I believe that band there is black anyway right there in front of it. so that only the light is coming through where I want it to. Try to see if I can show the controls a little better. Oops, sorry, there we go. Oh. Okay, you can just kind of make them out. And again, once this is all painted white, well, it's all going to be white, because from what I can tell, the decals are clear backed, so they're going to be black over top of it. But that will give me a lot of light coming through the back there with a nice SMD to light up the whole thing. I had to bevel this part back so that when you're looking through, you're not going to see that sharp edge, since the monitors are very close to the right edge. Not much room there to spare. Left edge is fine. The right edge is real close. And this is kind of at an angle the way you're looking at it, and I didn't want to have the light blocked or anything from the display. So, okay. So ready to go ahead and glue this photo etch in place. Fix up that little edge at the bottom, and then I'll be ready to go ahead and get this painted. Okay. All right, so I got a coat of flat black on the back of the lab unit, sealed off a couple of holes that were light leaking, and then I got a coat of Tamiya fine surface primer on the front of it. I also cut out the ladder and got it glued in place. I just have it epoxy, 5-minute epoxy on the bottom, and it kind of blends in and looks like it would be some normal joints on the bottom there. So all I need to do now is go ahead and get a coat of flat white on this on the inside, and then I'll be ready to go ahead and put the decals on the control panels. And then I want to do some screenshots and maybe touch up that panel back there with some colors. I don't think that's, well, it might be accurate, we'll see. So far they've been pretty accurate with what they show. I really like their detail. Like right there, you can see, it's hard to focus on that, sorry, how they have some extra detail there in that area for the ladder. I like the ladder too, how it's nice and rounded with the rungs. It looks like the one that they have in the film. So okay, so let me get a coat of flat white on that, let that dry, and then we'll get some decals. I also want to paint the roof on the inside and get some flat white on that. Once I do that, I can get that, well, I have to put the decals on first, because that would be hard to get to those panels once I put the roof on. So once I get the decals on, I can glue the roof on, and I'll have to seal around the outer edge of it as well and do some light leak seals, and then I can do some light tests on it. All right, so I have the lab area pretty much completed. I have it all painted, ladder put in. That one panel back there, I still want to do some screenshots and figure out if that's supposed to be black or something. The black panels there, I thought that these were decals, but they are not. And I found out the hard way, they are self-adhesive stickers. They just peel off. Luckily, I started with the little side one, put it in water, and of course it would not come off at all because it's not a decal, it's a sticker. I managed to salvage it so I can get a little bit of that little panel there, which you're really not going to see. The other two I peeled off, and they are in fact stickers. It does let light through for those displays. I mean, they're all one color. I can try to put some clear Tamiyas behind them and make them a little different. I put a little thin sheet of styrene back there, thinking this was a decal and it would have something to stick to with those openings. So I want to kind of play with it and do a bit of a test. I mean, I can always just paint it myself and do my own screen colors if I don't like it, but I'm just kind of disappointed that it's a decal or a sticker, not a decal. And I looked all over. There's really not too many instructions about these, so it didn't really tell me that they were not decals. These here look like they are decals. They're different, of course. They have that bluish tint. But I'm gonna test it just to make sure. Yeah, it doesn't have the same kind of a backing on it like it does on the other one, so I'm pretty sure these are decals. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and set this aside for a moment. I need to figure out what kind of light I'm gonna use, because it might not work quite as well behind that, but I have to kind of play with that and see how that's going to work. All right, so I'm doing a little bit of experimenting here, and I think I really like this a lot. I put a color changing LED behind it, just one, and it just catches the screens as it's changing, so they almost look like they're different colors, even though it's all the same color. And I just left the paper on it, or the paper sticker. And the camera washes this out a little bit, so it makes basically the blues, it kind of looks like they're all together, but really you can still see all the displays and they're differentiated. So I think that's really cool. And it's changing just enough that when you see it through the window from the pod bay, you're gonna see some motion and you're gonna see the screens differentiating in color. I think that's gonna be pretty awesome. So I'm gonna leave that as it is. I was thinking about cutting out those paper screens and putting in my own colors, but I think this is gonna be great. So all I wanna do is figure out a way, maybe put a white SMD down into those controls and see if I can get some light out of those as well. All right, but that's gonna be pretty cool. All right, so I cut out and sanded down the other pieces, the pod platforms, the little supports for them, the two big oxygen tanks for the back wall, and then the little fan units that get glued onto the roof as well. And then I cut out the photo etch for the floor, and I glued it in place along with the little teeny covers for each of these raised platforms. I'm not sure really the value of having the photo etch separate, except it gives you a raised surface, because you paint all of this white, then the decal goes on basically over top of the photo etch, which then is black and has some white lines in between it. So I went ahead and glued it on, then I glued the walls on because they're all going to be white as well. So everything in here, oh, and I glued it onto the bottom platform. So I'm going to let those two walls dry, and then I'll be able to go ahead and get a primer on this, and then get a flat coat of white over this whole thing, because then I'm going to be ready to go ahead and put the decals on and finish up the back wall. I didn't glue that on yet because I still have to put the tanks in, and the back wall has quite a few decals on it. Only a few decals on the sides of this. I think there might be a few over here, and then the big decal that goes right here in the center, which I can still get to pretty easily. So I'll let those dry and start working on getting that painted. All right, so I got a coat of fine surface primer, gray from Tamiya, on the whole thing. Just letting that dry. You definitely want to try to use some kind of primer when you're dealing with metal, especially, so the paint's going to stick and not chip off. Resin as well. Some resins aren't too bad for it, but I'd rather do it with this just to get a nice coating, and the fine surface primer sticks really well to any of these surfaces. So that's ready to paint. I've been working on a few other things. This little piece, these little pieces right here. Sorry, hold on. Let me pick that up. So these had little pieces of resin sticking up that were molded into them. You can see right there, I cut them off. These go down this way, and they go down in those little holes right there. Well, those weren't holes initially, they were indentations, so I drilled them out with a pin vise, and then I replaced the the part that goes down in, and I'll have to trim these off once they harden and dry completely. But they'll be able to go down into that hole and give them a little better strength. They actually are supposed to hold up the pod platform somewhat. I am working on an idea where I won't need that to happen, but I still want the detail there. And then there's also some other detail on these that the photo etch comes with, which I'll probably also just replicate using some thin styrene. But I wanted these to be stronger, so I used some brass rod, and I used some CA glue to glue it on inside. I'll again put a pin vise hole into it and glue them in. So once these set up really well, they're going to be nice and solid, and at least they won't be a problem with breaking off or falling or anything like that. So, okay. All right, so something else I'm working on as far as a light inside of this pod bay is that little control panel. You can see the hole that I drilled through. Has a red light on it, and I lit that up in my my original build. So I wanted to do the same thing. There's a decal that goes over top of that. So all it is a red light. So I'm going to use a Z LE SMD. Let me see if I can get that here and show you. Super, super tiny, and it's red. But turn that on. Even though it's so small, it is pretty bright. And it's brighter red than it looks in the camera. But I can just epoxy that into that hole from behind once I paint it, and then it'll come out the back, and then I drilled a hole down over to the side where I'll just run the wire. And on the lab wall, I'll just have to notch out a little part so it'll go over the wire. But you're not going to see any of this back here. None of that will be visible from the front, but you will see that red light shining through the decal. So that'll be cool. And I'll just put some 5-minute epoxy over it so it'll look like a lens, that kind of thing. But I wanted to get that done and drill it out before I do the final painting, and then I can glue that in once it's painted, and then just put the decal over top of it. Another thing I want to kind of show you is that there's a lot of obviously inaccurate dimensions for the interior of the Discovery. One of the most obvious ones that people have often talked about are the centrifuge, which is supposed to be behind this somewhere. We're not quite sure the orientation, but there just doesn't seem to be any room for it. But another part that is often questioned is the airlock, because that's a crucial scene where Dave jettisons himself with explosive bolts off of the door and launches the door off, and then launches himself into the airlock without his helmet, and then hurriedly shuts it so it can bring air in it and he can survive and get back in the ship. But there is literally no room that could exist on this ship with a sphere. Let me put this inside and I'll show you. And it's kind of cool because they gave this little partial part for the airlock, and you can see that there's barely any of it. The thickest part is like there at the top, maybe part of the side, but then towards the bottom it's virtually non-existent at all. But it has some of that airlock detail. Let me put that inside the sphere and I'll show you why that just won't work. Right, so at first I thought, why didn't they make it larger so it was like more of an accurate airlock? And that's why. That partial piece literally fits inside there, snug up against the sphere wall. And that's as much of an airlock that you would get in that area right there, with the dimensions of this pod being what they are. And it's really easy to figure out what these dimensions are. It's also fairly easy to figure out how it's orientated inside of the ship with the sphere. So that's really the room you're gonna have for that airlock. It doesn't exist. There's no way it could happen. I mean, it could be maybe, 2 or 3 feet, because this is obviously a larger or a smaller scale, but there's no way it's going to be the length that we see in the movie. But obviously, him catapulting into a 3-foot airlock would be kind of problematic as he got brained off the inside of it. Also too, like in the back, and yeah, there will be a collar on it, but there's really not a ton of room for the for the centrifuge inside of here. So again, one of those things that just literally could not exist in inside. The interior that we see from the sets could not exist inside of the sphere, and the model that we see outside of it. So needless to say, I'm not going to have that door open, and I wasn't planning to anyway, but you can see there's just literally no room for an actual airlock of the length that we see in the movie. All right, so I finished gluing the few parts that go on the roof, the ceiling, on the inside of the pod bay. So the kit came with these little fans, which are nicely detailed. So I glued those in place. They had 3 little just rounded, smooth domes right here, but in the actual film, there's more detail going on those little rounded protrusions. So the ones that I have there, those are some 3D printed parts that I got with a set from Carl Darby towards the end of when I was working on mine 2 years ago. And I had already finished most of mine, so I used a few of his parts. If you go back and look over my follow-up video to my build, you'll see where I used the lab area and the tanks in the back, and I did a little bit of detailing. But most of the parts I did not use, so I have several of them left over, and they're really nicely detailed from Carl Darby. So I sanded down those domes and just glued these on instead. And then when those are painted white, I can put some black accents on them, which is what they have. So, okay, so that's ready to go. I still have to figure out how I'm going to be lighting it. They're a bit thick right there, and I think you're going to see that ledge if I just try to do a light behind it. Debating about whether I want to just sand down the back or the top and make it sit thinner. That's what I may end up doing, but we'll get to that here in a little bit. So, okay. All right, so I got a coat of flat white on the pod bay floor, the underneath part, and then the 2 side walls. I let that dry, and then I went ahead and got the decals on over there to the side and over here. Now, these were pretty tricky because this decal sheet is basically one big decal. In other words, they're not separated, they're not cut out. So I had to go through, and each one that I pulled, after the first one gave me trouble, I had to basically cut around the little shape, stick it in water, and then I still needed a big enough piece of cardboard to hold on to, like for this piece here. So I couldn't just cut around the whole thing, or it would have been really hard to deal with. So I had to take a sharp X-Acto knife and just score around it so it would come loose from the other film, and then I had to gingerly take off the other film so it wouldn't come off as well. So it was no fun. Don't know why they do that. So this piece is going to be really difficult. I'm definitely going to have to cut it into parts, and I'm going to have to score all around every single bit of detail, or it's going to have clear parts over top, and I don't want that. So I went back and pulled the HTA Model Works version out that I remember using, and it seems to be the same way. I really could have sworn that it wasn't, but I guess I did the same thing and had to cut around and cut things out. You can see this one here, I kind of took some pieces off. It's a little different shape too. But yeah, that's going to be some work for sure. Especially these little fiddly parts. So these just are not going to work. These little teeny ones. Because there is no way that I'm going to go around and cut all of those loose and use them. So I'm going to have to come up with something else. I can probably get some black striping, like self-adhesive striping, and cut little pieces off. I think that's what I did on my scratch built one, but what a disappointment. I mean, the decals, the paper stickers turned out, but again, they weren't what I thought they were. I love this kit for everything else, but this is a problem. And I guess I can't complain because it's really the same as the other one that I used before. So it just makes it a lot more challenging when you're trying to when you're trying to work with something like that in a really strange shapes like this. But all right, but anyway, I got those on. So that's all the decals. I just have to maybe do a little bit of painting on the little fire extinguishers right there, if you can see them. Sorry, and there's the stickers in there. Sorry for the shakiness. So yeah, little tiny fire extinguishers. So I'll probably try to get some color on those. I'm going to go and look some screenshots and figure out what they are. But other than that, the walls are done. And I glued in the, sorry. Let's see what I'm doing here. I glued in the SMD in the back of this wall. Get some light on that. And I still have to go over that with a little bit of flat black. I'm probably not going to worry about painting this wall back here because you're not going to see it. There's really no point. I still have to get a window in that clear piece of plastic in that window. But I have the I have that little light in there, so let me turn it on. Sorry, I'm trying to look through the camera. So you can see there it shines pretty bright. I'll get that coated with some white and then some black. But it looks pretty cool right there. And again, the red doesn't show up as sharp and bright on the camera as it does in real life, but it looks pretty cool. It's nice and it's a nice red separation. It's clearly a red light shining through there, and that's going to be pretty cool. There you go. It's a little bit better. Okay, so let me go ahead and throw the back lab wall on here real quick, and then I'll show you what I've gotten done so far at this point. All right, so pardon the shakiness again. It's kind of hard to set this down, so I'm just holding these together. See if I can rest my hand on there. Okay. Come on. All right. So you can see that back lab area, which is really cool. You can make out those monitors, which are cycling through some different colors, which is also pretty sweet. Wall's all painted. The decals are on it. I have the red little control panel. This other side, I have the stickers or decals. I'm sorry, on there as well. Let me turn that light off and see if that will make a difference on there. Sorry. Trying to do that with my hand and the camera. Okay, yeah, so you can see it a little bit better. And again, there we go. That's better for those monitors. So you can see the separation between them, except for certain colors like the red and the blue tend to wash out a bit, but they always look like that right there. When you see like the lighter colors, the separations, that's how they look all the time. So that's going to be pretty sweet. You can see back there in the lab area, you can see the ladder. It looks pretty cool. Different controls. So that's pretty awesome. All right. So a lot of progress done on this. Most of this is ready to go. I have to work on the back wall with the tanks. That's going to have a lot more decals on it. I'm going to do that all before I even attach that onto here. So. All right, so that's going to wrap up this video for this week. A lot of good progress gotten on the interior. A great start to it. Like I said, a little bit of difficulties here and there, the decals mainly, but they're workable, and I can cut around the parts, but that'll be for another day. So coming along really well. Now I'm on vacation. I'm going to be traveling tomorrow, which is Monday the 20th. I'm going to be traveling to Pennsylvania to visit my family, celebrate my birthday, which is the 21st. So I'm not going to tell you my age, but I'm not a young man anymore. But I got myself cleaned up a bit, got rid of the scruffy beard that you've probably seen. Quarantine doesn't make for good habits of hygiene if you're not going out and seeing people. So, all right. I'll be away from the bench for just a few days. I'm only going to be gone about 4 or 5 days. I'll be back again and then start working on this project some more. And when I get the interior to the Spindrift, I'll start working on that one as well. So thank you to all my new subscribers. Stay tuned. And we'll be working some more on this. Thank you.